Good morning. I'm Abby Pogrebin, and welcome to the world's largest summit on anti-Semitism and hate, Never Is Now. Whether you drove in from across town or across the country, or even across the ocean, we are so glad to have all of you here in this room. Hello as well to the thousands who are joining virtually. We feel you.
Hello, indeed. Welcome on this Super Wednesday, and thank you, everyone. Whether you're here in the brand new section of the Jacob Javits Center or joining us live via live stream, I'm Juju Chang, and along with Abby, my friend, I am so thrilled to be back hosting Never Is Now for the third year. Together, we're about to do something really important. Thank you for the round of applause. I think it kind of goes without saying that so much has changed in the last year, right? And this event could not be coming at a more vital moment. And we are all still reeling months after October 7th, and many of the hostages are still in captivity while the IDF is still waging war on Hamas in Gaza. Let's point out the loss of innocent lives is horrific and heartbreaking, full stop. And the levels of anti-Jewish and anti-Israel hate have risen to stunning levels, also full stop. All of us here today are painfully and at sometimes personally aware of this, but we're here to be part of the change. So first, take a look around you at this amazing gathering of people. People who are passionate about fighting hate for good. Take a minute to say hello to your neighbors. Sort of like being in shul. Right? That's why we're here, because convening power is a superpower. Some of your neighbors are religious, others are secular. There are people left of center, people right of center, but we are gathering together today. Many people in your row may be spending every day calling for hostages to be free, or they may be worrying about whether their children have picked a college that has a vibrant Jewish life and will feel safe there. Or others are building alliances with other threatened groups in this angry age. We can easily find the things that separate us. These days, those divisions are hitting the headlines. But today and tomorrow, here at Jacob Javits, let's resolve not to do that. Instead, let's recognize and strengthen the extraordinary spirit that unites us, all of us in this room. It's that fundamental decency and the refusal to stay silent when hate gets really loud. Together, we are not helpless and we are not powerless.
Showing up and speaking out are so vital. Sometimes we underestimate the impact of being willing to lift your voice against the shouts of extremism, whether those come in an online discussion, in a city council meeting, or a rally on campus. As Dr. King reminded us, quote, "I will stand up, I will speak out, not to offend, but to defend." Don't let the fear of what people might think stop you from speaking your mind. Speak up, he said. You deserve to be heard. And of course, a constant catalyst in the fight against hate is the organization that unites us all here today, ADL. I need ADL now. We all need ADL right now. We are all part of ADL's mission to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all, which continues to be as critical today as it was when it was written over 110 years ago. ADL is so grateful to have all of you here as dedicated members of one ADL community.
I know we all feel that someday soon, I know that we all hope that someday soon things will be calm and peaceful and the ADL won't need to be as visible. Sadly, this is not that moment. ADL is in the news and on the front lines. ADL has helped host rallies to call for the release of the hostages and the rejection of anti-Zionism and anti-Israel sentiment. Their team has been vigilant in tracking anti-Semitic attacks or threats, and they've helped build grassroots partnerships on the ground in many states so that no one has to fight hate alone. In recent weeks, ADL CEO Jonathan Greenblatt, who will grace this stage soon, and ADL's teams across the country have gone to schools in many states to share strength with Jewish students, to convince universities to take action against hate, and to have challenging conversations with students who need to hear why disagreement and debate are fine, but taunts, threats, and even attacks are simply unacceptable. ADL's Not on My Campus campaign calls for no tolerance for anti-Semitism. ADL is even releasing a first-of-its-kind report card assessing universities on how they are responding to the surge of anti-Semitism, with the goal of creating a race to the top and highlighting ways that universities are creating safe and welcoming campuses.
In just a few minutes, you will hear directly from Jonathan as he shares his annual State of Hate insights about the challenging time we all find ourselves in and the ways we can make a difference.
We are not okay. We're not okay. As my friend Bret Stephens so succinctly put it, all of us now live in an October 8th world. We've endured the painful, distressing, and clarifying events of the past 151 days. That video that we just saw could have been 10 times or 100 times as long, and it still wouldn't capture all the anti-Jewish hate of just the past few months. The world of October the 8th is one in which the perpetrators of the worst anti-Semitic massacre since the Holocaust are celebrated as heroes, not just in Ramallah or Beirut, but in London and New York and on campuses like Harvard and Columbia. An October the 8th world is one in which the prayers for the safety of hostages, men and women, children and the elderly, are met with vile hate speech and moral confusion. An October the 8th world is one in which rape and sexual assault draw universal outrage unless committed against Israeli women and girls. An October the 8th world is one in which college campuses are policed relentlessly for the smallest of microaggressions. But there seems to be no cop on the beat when the insults and threats are screamed at Jewish students in the quad, outside their fraternities, or even in the classroom. The world of October the 8th is one of an unprecedented surge of anti-Semitism all over the planet. In Brazil, incidents are up over 960%. In France, 384%. In Germany, 320%. And right here in the United States, up 360% since 10/7. If there ever were a moment to break the glass and pull the alarm labeled "Never Again," that time is right now. According to ADL's Center on Extremism, in just 3 months after 10/7, there were 3,291 anti-Semitic incidents in America. That's an average of 34 anti-Jewish acts each and every day. Anti-Semitism isn't just an abstract issue. This is a real-life threat to our lives, to Jewish life in America, and again, to Jews around the world. Yes, it could happen here because it is. Yes, never is now, because if we don't insist on it, the consequences could be devastating. And that means all of us need to be clear-eyed about the threats that we face and have the determination to face them. Now, one of the biggest threats is that our opponents have worked tirelessly to muddy the message, to make what's morally clear fuzzy, to lie and to gaslight about what's happening. You know, at times it feels like we're all living in a Kafka novel. As we know, there's a group of people who want us to believe that anti-Zionism doesn't equal anti-Semitism, that somehow one can be adamantly opposed to the existence of the world's only Jewish state, where half of the Jews on planet Earth live, but have no problem with actual Jews. It's absurd. So let's make this very clear. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And look, before the folks at Harvard or Columbia or the editors at left-wing Jewish magazines that few of us actually read, before they start to object, let's also be clear about what anti-Zionism means. Anti-Zionism doesn't mean having a problem with a set of actions by the Israeli government. Anti-Zionism doesn't mean protesting the policies of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Anti-Zionism doesn't mean you support Palestinian human rights. Anti-Zionism doesn't mean you're upset about the conflict in Gaza. Now look, that's what our enemies want you to think. And they are lying. Anti-Zionism, plain and simple, means that Jews, alone among all the peoples of the world, do not deserve freedom and self-determination in their homeland. Anti-Zionism is a negation of Jewish history, a denial of Jewish humanity. Today, in our October the 8th world, American Jews and Americans of all kinds, they're hearing with their own ears and they're seeing with their own eyes the hollow claim of those who purport to be anti-Zionists but not anti-Semites. It's rich. It's like saying in 1964, I don't hate black Americans, but I just don't think we need to pass the Civil Rights Act or end Jim Crow. It just doesn't add up. If your idea of expressing dissent against Israeli government policies is to attack Jews in America, or anywhere for that matter, that doesn't make you a decolonizer or a freedom fighter or a progressive. It makes you a bigot, plain and simple. And don't take my word for it. You know who's cheering on the anti-Zionists? The neo-Nazis and the right-wing extremists and the nativists that ADL has been tracking and battling for years and is still tracking and battling today. The tiki torch markers in Charlottesville and the SJP radicals are two sides of the same anti-Semitic coin. But I must say, I've got to share, what amazes me is that when ADL says that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, or when the Hillel director says that the mob chanting from the river to the sea outside their door on campus is a threat, journalists at major newspapers don't listen to the victim. Instead, they literally go looking for an alternative point of view. You all know what I'm talking about. You've all read these stories in the New York Times. To be sure, Professor so-and-so says, or the head of Jewish Voices for Peace counters. Really? Really? You know, when my friend Derek Johnson, the head of the NAACP, says that something is racist, reporters from the Times or journalists from MSNBC don't rush to the phones to get an alternative point of view from David Duke or the Proud Boys. So why is it different for us? Why are Jewish people being told over and over and over again that we have no say in what constitutes anti-Semitism? Why are the majority of us dismissed or marginalized or told we just don't get it? And even worse, they tell us that words don't mean what we know they actually mean. Take the word genocide. Educated people from the UN, foreign ministries around the world, and of course on elite college campuses, want us to believe that genocide is an army fighting a defensive war while facilitating humanitarian aid, even as they're texting and calling civilians, urging them out of harm's way. And yet we are told genocide is not the terrorists literally next door who not only said they want to kill every Jewish man, woman, and child, but actually did all that they could to reach every victim possible. And we're told that from the river to the sea doesn't mean eliminate the Jewish state and the Jews living between those two bodies of water. It's just a catchy slogan. And we're told, believe every woman, except if those being raped are Jewish women. And we're told that globalize the Intifada is not a call for a violent uprising, but just a Gandhian plea for nonviolent resistance. Really, what's up is down. What's hot is cold. Day is night. As Orwell famously put it, if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought. Now, a case in point, time and again, especially since 10/7, elected officials, campus administrators, and the media tell us that the problem in America is the rise in anti-Semitism and the rise in Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hate. That's because of the conflict between Israelis and Hamas, that there is now a conflict happening, spilling out on our streets here in the US on both sides, that both are being attacked, that both are equally threatened on campus, that both are routinely, serially being harassed by their professors and teachers. Now look, I want to make sure that no one in this room or no one watching online misconstrues my words. Anti-Muslim hate is an absolutely unjustifiable form of bigotry, full stop. It should have no place anywhere in our country or anywhere in the world. And when it happens, we've got to take it seriously. We need to combat it, we need to prosecute it, and we need to stop it from happening. Whether it's a teenager being shot in Burlington, Vermont for walking down the street, or a small child, an innocent child stabbed to death in suburban Chicago. For years, ADL has been a partner in that fight, calling it out time and again, including advocating for resources that protect Muslim institutions and laws that prevent hate crimes against Muslims. We've done that in the past. without hesitation. We will do it in the future without hesitation, and I'm proud of that track record. And yet the fact is that right here and now, there is no data that shows us that incidents of anti-Muslim hate today are at a level or a kind comparable to the rampant, raging anti-Semitism engulfing our campuses and our country. And to suggest that these two issues are of the same magnitude right now, or of the same urgency, is to minimize anti-Semitism. It is to silence Jews and those concerned specifically about anti-Jewish hate. Let's be crystal clear. This is not a contest about who has it worse. All Americans should be against all types of hate. The problem is the need that too many people seem to have in not singularly calling out and battling anti-Semitism on its own. It's tone deaf, it's insulting, and frankly, it feels like it's being done to minimize anti-Jewish hate and the wave away our real concerns. And let me tell you, at ADL, we won't let them. So we will never stop calling out and fighting anti-Semitism, whether it comes from the violent white nationalist or the hardened anti-Zionist. Both are threats, and we will battle them with equal energy. And we will do so. We will do so because we will never be quiet in the face of anti-Jewish hate. Unfortunately, right now, that battle, it's taking a different, more serious, and more dangerous shape. Groups like SJP and other Hamas apologists have embraced a whole new playbook since 10/7. Until now, their strategy was one of isolation, or anti-normalization, as they call it, focused on boycotts, divestment, and urging progressive groups and all Americans, frankly, to shun and ostracize their Jewish neighbors. There are lots of examples of this tactic, like refusing to let Jewish groups march in the Gay Pride Parade in Chicago, or law school students trying to bar Zionist speakers in Berkeley, or climate activists in DC refusing to attend a rally and stand alongside their Jewish peers. But now, it's no longer enough for them. On October the 8th, as Israeli soldiers were still tracking down murderous terrorists hiding in Israel, as families, some of whom you will hear from today, were still wondering if their loved ones were dead or kidnapped or just incinerated beyond recognition, as all of us in the public were trying to grasp what had actually happened inside Israel, SJP released a new toolkit to their followers. This toolkit, which you can still find online, unapologetically celebrated the atrocities of Hamas, and it also spelled out a new strategy of confrontation to, in their words, dismantle Zionism. And we've seen the results of this strategy all over the country. That video you saw before I came on, it gave you a taste of it. It's the angry mob that vandalized a falafel restaurant in Philadelphia, just one of hundreds of businesses that we know of that have been hit coast to coast. It's the encampment outside the suburban home of our country's Secretary of State, the highest ranking Jewish American in the country, and so-called activists have erected a sign declaring their space Kibbutz Blinken, to evoke a nightmarish comparison to the kibbutzim that were savaged on 10/7. They sit there day and night while he travels the world trying to bring peace. They menace his young family, constantly screaming into megaphones and speakers to terrify and terrorize his wife and children. Or it's the Museum of Modern Art, right here in New York City, where a few weeks ago, the building was shut down as pro-Hamas activists shouted the names of the prominent Jews who happened to sit on MoMA's Board of Trustees. And of course, it's campus after campus after campus, where student centers have been occupied, classrooms disrupted, as SJP and their fellow travelers berate and belittle Jewish students, almost always with impunity. Facing these threats, it seems that the Jewish community in the United States has two choices: flight or fight. It pains me, as the head of the ADL, as a father, it pains me that some have made the choice to flee, to hide their identity, to wear a baseball cap instead of a kippah, to remove the mezuzah on their doorpost. I know of many parents who've instructed their children to change their names on their Uber profiles so they appear less obviously Jewish. I'm guessing that includes some of you in this room today. Look, these are tough decisions, deeply personal decisions. And I'm not judging, because I get it. I understand the desire to deflect the threat. I understand the urge to protect our kids. But I'm also seeing another response. Not deflection, but defiance. Not flight, but fight. There are reports of jewelry shops unable to keep gold stars of David in stock, as young people are proud to wear them around their necks. There are accounts of high schoolers suddenly donning kippot, proudly demonstrating to their classmates that they are Jewish and proud. And this isn't just a phenomenon driven by young people. Open your phones. I bet nearly everyone sitting here today in the Javits Center has a text chain or a WhatsApp group or a Facebook chat buzzing with people sharing information and organizing to help our brothers and sisters in Israel and to fight back against this onslaught of anti-Semitism around the world. And what we've seen in this new Jewish grassroots, in community after community, and in the work that ADL does every day, it gives me hope. It shows me, and it shows all of us, that the time for complacency is over. We can't assume that American Jewish life will continue to be a comfortable one unless we do something now, unless we transform ourselves from observers to activists, from onlookers to advocates. Our community has accomplished so much in this country and contributed so much to the common good. No one can take that away from us, and it's time we stop letting them think that they can do so. The Jewish community has been an indispensable part of this country since its earliest days. We have overcome discrimination, broken barriers, and exceeded expectations. We started companies, founded labor unions, and cured diseases. We built schools, funded universities, and started hospitals. We created theaters, launched studios, and started charities. We changed norms, passed laws, and secured judgments that made this country better for its Jewish people and ultimately better for all its people. You see, the bottom line is that there is not you see, the bottom line is that there is not a part of American life that the Jewish community has not touched and impacted for good. And so, the time has come to say the harassment and the attacks must stop. Explaining away your anti-Semitism will no longer be tolerated. Refusing to prosecute the laws or to enforce your own policies in your institution when the perpetrators are targeting Jews, it must cease. The twisting of language, the moral cowardice, the blind eye toward anti-Semitism must end now. Because if not, you will hear our voices. You will see us outside your doors, and we will see you in court. Our donations that you relied on, gone. Our votes that you seek, forget about it. Our friendship or alliances, no more. At this moment, in this October the 8th world, we will not be silent. We will not let our country be lost to the anti-Semites and bigots. We will not flee. We will fight, and we will win. Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chai. And God bless America. Now, a few months ago, I had my first opportunity to visit Israel since the 10/7 massacre. And let me tell you, there is absolutely no substitute for experiencing Israel's reality on the ground. We toured the communities in the Gaza envelope. We visited the kibbutzim. And I saw the spot where my friend Ofer Lipstadt was killed. He was murdered that morning on 10/7 in Kfar Aza, a community that he really helped to build. This was a man dedicated to creating peace with his Gazan neighbors, and they gunned him down in front of his house. We toured the northern border. We saw the empty homes in Kiryat Shmona. We saw the smoke from a Hezbollah drone that attacked an Israeli position well inside the Green Line, killing an Israeli reservist. And we met with Israeli survivors of the attacks in the south, families of hostage victims, and so many extraordinary volunteers doing incredible work to provide aid to those in need. It was a difficult but important visit. My trip concluded by meeting with my friend, Israeli President Isaac Herzog. President Herzog and I discussed many topics, and of course, I shared my concern and the concern from all of us at ADL and all over America for what the Israeli people are enduring. But what struck me, what touched me, was the genuine concern that President Herzog, and frankly so many in Israel, expressed about the safety and well-being of us. He asked, with his hand on mine, about the safety of the American Jewish community and about our sense of anxiety in the face of rising anti-Semitism. I arrived there concerned for them, but I found that they in turn were concerned for us. Look, we are so fortunate to be joined today by a man who has been a steadfast protector of the Jewish people in Israel and a voice for all of us in diaspora. A man who is doing everything humanly possible to bring home our loved ones still held hostage by the terrorists in Gaza. He brings such an incisive perspective on the challenges we face and how we need to work to protect them, how we need to work to overcome them, how we need to work to come together. So truly, it is now my honor and an absolute privilege to introduce to us today from Israel, the President of the Jewish state, Isaac Herzog.
Dear friends, Shalom from Jerusalem, the beating heart and soul of the Jewish people. I'm so deeply moved that all of you have come together today, activists, leaders, and professionals of all backgrounds and faiths. Never is now, dear friends, and never before has it been so urgent to come together to fight and combat anti-Semitism. October 7th was the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. And I believe that since October 7th, we've seen the worst spike of anti-Semitism around the world since the Holocaust as well. I know that many of you have directly experienced it, and you're going to talk about it in the conference. You've seen it on campus and classrooms and streets and elsewhere, from colleagues in your workplace and elected officials. And this matters. And I'm so honored that you've come together to make your voices heard loud and clear. In the face of hate, we cannot be silent. This fight against anti-Semitism is not just a fight of the Jewish people. It's a fight of all those who stand for justice, dignity, democracy, and human civilization. We know anti-Semitism can come in many forms. It may be disguised as Israel hatred or anti-Zionism. It may come from religious extremists or from those who pretend to speak in the name of human rights whilst denying the most basic rights of the Jewish people. These include the rights of 134 hostages still held by Hamas, a terrorist organization which represents the pure evil of genocidal anti-Semitism and a pure anti to the basic values of humanity. We are caring for the babies, children, women, and men being held in Gaza, and we pray for their release. But none of us will rest until they all come back home safely and quickly. So, dear friends, in the fight against hate and bigotry, we need comprehensive national strategies, like the one pioneered by President Joe Biden under his administration. I thank him, and I thank Vice President Kamala Harris. I thank the Special Anti-Semitism Envoy, Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, and of course, all parts of the aisle in Congress and in the Senate who are fighting against anti-Semitism. We must use all the tools at our disposal. We must insist that universities enforce their codes of conduct. We must demand responsibility and transparency from social media companies. We must urge institutions of every type to adopt the IHRA definition, to pursue legal avenues when necessary. Therefore, my dear friends, your conference comes at a vital time in a very critical moment, especially in the United States of America. I want to thank the ADL, its leaders and members, especially my dear good friend Jonathan Greenblatt, who is showing immense courage and leadership in the fight against anti-Semitism. For more than a century, and especially since October 7th, ADL has been at the forefront in fighting and battling against hatred, refusing to look the other way when hatred begins to lurk and corrupt other societies. In the name of the state and people of Israel, I thank ADL, and I thank each of you, and I know that our voice will be louder than the voice of hatred, and that it will ring loud and clear, a voice of conscience, morality, and goodwill, a voice of justice, love, and peace. Thank you all, and shalom, dear friends.
Please welcome Senior Regional Director Israel, the Middle East, and North Africa, Carol Nouriel.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. Tomorrow will be 5 months to the horrific Hamas attack on October 7th. Today, here at ADL's Never Is Now, we would like to give the stage to two Israelis. Two personal stories, two experiences, and I'd like to welcome them to the stage. Daniel Lipstadt and Ainor Kagno. Please join me. So before we start, I'd like to say that this session might contain content that is hard to listen to. If any of you feel the need to leave the room, you should feel free to do so. It's hard to talk about October 7th as a whole. So much to say, a lot to digest, a lot to process. We as Israelis are still in the beginning of it. But just so we have the numbers right, 1,200 Israelis were murdered, 253 were kidnapped. We at ADL had as a top priority from day one, even before we understood the scope of what was taking place near Gaza, the issue of the release of the hostages. Today, 134 hostages are still in captivity in Gaza. And we have today an empty chair this morning at the first row that represents their absence and our aspiration to see them back home now.
Now.
So Shalom, Daniel Lipstadt, grandson of Yochevet and Oded Lipstadt, both kidnapped from their home at kibbutz near Oz. Yochevet was released on October 23rd, and Oded is still in captivity in Gaza. And we have with us today also Ainor Kagno, the main photographer of the Nova Music Festival, which had the unbelievable death toll of 364 people who just came to celebrate and dance. So Daniel, we all remember those moments on October 7th when we started to realize the scary reality of what was happening in communities near Gaza. We started to see videos of elderly people as well as small children being taken into Gaza on trucks, on motorcycles, taken by foot, walking long distances. Saba Oded and Savta Yochevet among them. I know it's very emotional and might be very difficult for you, but can you please take us back to that day, and when did you and your family realize what was going on in kibbutz near Oz?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for being here. It's very important for us to tell our stories. On the 7th of October, I've been abroad. I woke up to this horror. Never believed that something like this could happen, a complete shock. On 8 o'clock in the morning, I had my last messages with my grandparents. They were in bed, they woke up. My grandfather told my grandma, Yochke, yesh milchama. Tried to close the door handle, and 5 terrorists breached their home and shot the door. He got wounded in the hand, and he just took them from there. I lost connection with them at 8 o'clock in the morning. That was the last time I had connection with them. Everything just disappeared. I thought they might be inside the safe room and just the phone signal lost. After that, I was talking to this beautiful guy, wife. This is my best friend from the kibbutz. We've been together since we are babies. His wife, she was in the safe room. He's a paramedic. He went out, usually take care of my grandfather many times. And she was there in the safe room with the 3 children in 39 weeks of pregnancy. And at 10:30 in the morning, I lost my connection with her when she's saying, "They're shooting on your Tam bed." I was sure she's gone. Then I saw all those jeeps in Iroz, and I told my partner, I have to go back home. Tomorrow I have 200 funerals at least. Then luckily at 12:30, I got a message from her, so I knew that she's fine. My community suffered an incredible loss. Kibbutz Nir Oz, where I grew up and lived, 1 of every 4 persons from Kibbutz Nir Oz have been murdered or violently kidnapped. 1 of every 4. And the information I got in the evening was that my grandparents are missing. They're probably been kidnapped, and their house is completely burned.
So you mean you didn't see a video in the first hours of the...
I didn't. I saw just videos of what's going on in the kibbutz. Everybody saw Shiri Biba's video. And I didn't know anything about my grandparents until Hamas released a message about my grandma to be released.
So hard. Thank you, Daniel. Ainor, October 7th, you, along with thousands of Israelis, were celebrating life and peace at the Nova Music Festival outside of Reim. During the hours after the attack, you did something that most people would not even think to do. You tried to document the names and the faces of those who were at the festival. That information proved invaluable in helping families know the fate of their loved ones. Your photograph really helped the Israeli intelligence and security forces with the identification process. Can you please tell us about that morning, about your experience? And I have to say about, how did you have the state of mind to engage in such a heroic action? And I know you don't like me to say heroic, but this is really unbelievable.
Yeah, it was quite a party. Nova Festival was the most beautiful festival I've been in the world, especially in Israel. This is my job. This is what I do. I go to trance music festivals, and Nova was a special one. And 6:30, it's a golden hour of the people who go to party. 6:30, it's just when the sun comes on your face and you see the faces of your friends and all the happiness for us, something spiritual. And I remember this very clearly. 6:29, we had a big siren, big noise. And we heard, and we saw thousands of missiles, or hundreds of missiles, something insane, just popping about our head. And everybody got excited. And my photographer, I was a manager of the photographers, and I bring 3 photographers of mine that I mentor, I teach. And Yuval, she's a girl, she got panicked, and I needed to go on her to make her calm from the missiles. Something about 10, 20 minutes we needed to get out of the festival. And I think this is a reason why I got saved, because I could recognize from the shooting of gun from very far away, it's a type of gun of terrorists, because it was automatic. So you know that IDF shoots half automatic, like pew, pew, pew. And the terrorists shoot like ta, 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 ta. You can hear it from far and you're getting excited. So I grab all my things, get away, start running with my car, and my car get like injured with running, and we needed to go to a bomb shelter. In the bomb shelter, we were like 50 people inside a small bomb shelter without breathing. People get panic, people get screaming. I could hear the guns from far away. I could see cops shooting around. And it's continued for hours. But for me, the most interesting part and the most hard part, that when I get to Kibbutz Tzelim, we were 250 people who survived there. And just the way I deal with trauma is by doing stuff, by being productive. So I asked the only security guy, what can I do? And he said to me, start to write down all the names. And then I understand that we're in a hostage situation, that we need a rescue from the situation. So I start managing all the situation, and I get someone here or down the boy's name. I took the girl's name, and because I was the only figure of authority there, kind of try to control the situation, the hard request come to me. People start coming to me like they're on the phone with their friends because they get shot and injured and getting hiding in some bushes, and send me location to come to save them. Other people come to me and saying that their friends are being like closed, designed bomb shelters in houses in the kibbutzim, and the terrorists drilling to the door to get them out. One of the hardest conversations that I had, it's some girl come to me like totally panicked, like shock in her eyes, and she said that her best friend mom called her, the friend that she was in the festival. And the mom said to this girl that her daughter answered the phone, and there was an Arabic voice saying, I'm going to rape your child, and I want you to know that. And this girl coming to me and asking for help, and you have no emotion, so you're just being productive. And I write down all the names and all the people that need to rescue, and it's continue for hours. People coming to me saying they're hiding in trashes and getting injured, and like you hear the screaming, and people coming to me. Some girl said that she was talking to her boyfriend on the phone, and then she heard like a loud noise, and there was a silence. And they're coming to me to help, to get help, to get rescue, and you can do nothing, like nothing. All the panic, all the death,
so much
all the terror.
helplessness, and
so yeah.
And in the midst of all of that, you took action. Daniel, your grandmother was released from captivity on October 23rd. I think she was in the second batch of hostages that were released. For the past 152 days, your grandfather is still being held hostage in Gaza. Can you please share what it was like when your grandmother was released, knowing that your grandfather is still there? And of course, we pray with you and with the other families of the hostages for their release. Please.
So, first of all, it was a great joy, feeling of joy that my grandma came back. But I think we have so many families that are it was just tearing families when my grandfather didn't come back and my grandmother stayed there, So there are so many families like that as well we see now. That's why we need to fight so much more to find a family where the only child and only grandchild is still there, and the mother and the grandmother released. Katsir family, when Hannah released and Rami was murdered and Elad is still there. Cunyo family, we have, this feeling is horrible. It's just a total devastation. And now we have 134 hostages still there, 152 days. My grandfather is an 84 years old man with sickness of blood pressure. I don't know where he is. I don't know if he survived that. We have no news about him in the last 90 days, you know. But we have to be optimistic. We have to be optimistic and know that we can have hope in this such a complex situation.
You know, for many years, your grandparents were peace activists, and actually your grandfather used to help Palestinian Gazan children and take them to medical treatment in Israel, drive them to Israel. After October 7th, what does it mean to be a peace activist, and how do you see the people in Gaza in contrast to Hamas?
So, first of all, you know, my grandfather, as ADL, is helping minorities. It was his life, you know. I see him as someone that helped the minorities so much. He was helping the Bedouins in the 70s. After that, he went in 1984 to Gaza to meet Rashad Shawa, the leader there, to say, you need to build here schools to make education. That was my grandfather, and also helping the sick people. That's how I see him, as a peace activist. And now, you know, on 7th of October, of course, it's devastating what happened, and it's crushed the heart. But with what I expect is also to see the people of Gaza going out, speaking, doing something to show that there is possibility to do something different there. That's what I expect from them. That's what my grandfather would expect from them.
Thank you, Daniel. Ainor, you're a photographer who specializes in the Israeli party scene. Through your work, you have gotten to know many across Israel, including some who were killed on October 7th. How are you coping with both the events of October 7th, the loss you have experienced, and I understand that you're working on a photo project that is related to October 7th. Can you please tell us about that?
There is something special about the trans culture. It's like a big family. Most of the people doesn't know about this culture. It's totally different. For us, it's like a spiritual place. It's not just a dance floor. Like, as a photographer, you capture moments, and in my pictures, we are praying. Even the dances, with the hands raised up and talking to God while you dance on the speaker. And on the 7th of October, we get to our Bet Knesset, our dance floor, and take our freedom. And the another word for trans, it's freedom. And it's took from us. My photographer, Yoni, that I was mentoring, he was just a kid. He was 20 years old kid. And he got shot in the head by snipers when he's running away. And I bring him to the scene. I have full responsibility about him. He was my kid. I was teaching him. So for me, it's very personal. And through the pictures, I believe you can tell a different story. So in my project, I want to show the pictures of parties, of festivals that all the American, all the world knows the festivals. They're always going, the happiness, the connections, the nature. And to show that, and then to show pictures from the Nova Festival, and just to show it's the same festival, it's the same people. And then you can see the after, and you're building connections visually through the pictures, you're making them some journey. And I believe it's different. So this is a project of mine that I want to make with a picture, to raise awareness, and to talk about the most interesting stuff about this culture is that if you don't understand the culture, you cannot help the culture. And you need to understand the word, the slang, the belief, the love. It's totally different from everything else that people know, and you must tell the story, because there's like thousands of people who survived who need the help. My friends, 5 months in, still peeing in bed at night, and you cannot give them help if you don't speak the language. You need to understand the culture of trans and nature parties And these are people are not like kind of hippies, are the people who are going to the best places in the army and the best places in the workforce. And to help them, you need to understand what they're talking about, their belief. If you will not understand the culture, you cannot help the culture. And I believe that through my work, through my speaking, I could give this connection, because it's hit totally different.
Thank you, Einor. We don't have that much time, but I want to ask, I have a question for the two of you, just 1 minute. You know, the Jewish people, Israel, are going through a very dark moment, filled with pain for the loss on October 7th, and also anguish about the 134 hostages who remain captive in Gaza. What happened on October 7th, and it's important for us to know it as Israelis, it impacted us, but it also impacted Jews around the world and others around the world. So what is your message to the over 30,000, I think, people here in the Jewish community and others? And what can our community do to support you and to support your families?
So first of all, you know, the incredible growth of anti-Semitism shows us that it is our world today. Closing our eyes, being naive, assuming this is the past isn't an option anymore. We need to call, first of all, every second of the day for the release of the 134 hostages immediately. And comfort the anti-Semitism everywhere. It's an honor to be here. Thank you very much to all of you, to Jonathan, and thanks America for the huge support that is giving Israel. And the last thing I would like to ask you is, because they cannot speak, speak for them. Speak for the hostages and do whatever you can, everywhere, every second, for their release. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Einor?
So I have a positive.
Positive is important.
Yes. There's a quote from Alex Hermozis that's saying, I don't need confidence, I have experience. And from the Bible time, they're trying to kill us. And we survive and prosper. And in Holocaust time, they try to kill us. And we survive and prosper. And through tons of wars, they're trying to kill us. And we survive and prosper. I don't need confidence. I have experience. This is what we will do. We will survive and prosper. Because there's no other way. We have to lose everything. I don't need confidence. I have experience. This is the first thing. The second thing, it's our responsibility to help. On the 8th of October, we saw it. Everything shut down, the government shut down, and the private sector helped. I was in the same day, on the 8th of October, going to my old school and making a war room to try to give supply to the soldiers. And when I was doing it, I was seeing the private sector doing that. He built amazing systems of thousands of people alone in less than 24 hours. And the private sector is the one who helping me like as a psychological stand and doing the retreats and everything together, the private sector. So the responsibility to help us is the private sector to raise money and to help us to come back to life. Because now is better. Now my friends getting suicidal. Now they survived there, but part of their soul are dead. So this is our responsibility to raise the money, to talk, to make the retreat, to make the psychological care, to bring the hostages back. It's our responsibility, no one else. So we will survive and prosper, and we will make it good. It will not be good. We will make it.
So we will end here, and you all see that. This sense of hope, responsibility, empathy, this spirit that you see, this is the Israeli spirit, and that's the hope. Thank you very much. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Ainor.
Thank you very much to all of you, and our hope is bringing everybody home as soon as possible.
Since the last never is now, the historic U.S. National Strategy to Counter Anti-Semitism was published by the White House. For the first time, this whole of government, whole of society strategy elevated the fight against anti-Semitism to a federal priority, and ADL experts directly contributed to the plan, including more than 30 distinct policy recommendations. ADL is now working with government agencies to support the implementation of this plan, and we are also holding ourselves and the government accountable for meeting these commitments. This is just one of many ways that the Biden administration is playing a vital role in fighting anti-Semitism, both at home and abroad. As hate, yes. As hate and anti-Semitism do not stop at national borders. Today, we are so proud to welcome Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, the U.S. Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. She is a good friend, not just of mine, but of the ADL, and she will be discussing her work in disrupting anti-Semitism and bringing together allies around the world to support this work. Ambassador Lipstadt, as we all know, and as every student should learn, has had a storied career as a historian, academic, and author, and she's probably best known for taking on Holocaust denier David Irving in court, where she eventually emerged victorious. Deborah, just as an aside, was portrayed by Rachel Weisz in the 2016 film Denial, and you should see it if you never have. Please welcome my friend, the extraordinary Ambassador Lipstadt, to the stage. So first of all, I have to say a private, personal, not so private, thank you.
Amongst 38 of your 100 closest friends.
4,000 people. I've known you for many years, but when you got this job, I exhaled. Because you have been our voice of clarity, of sanity, and of courage, and I just want to thank you.
It's a privilege. It's really a privilege. Everybody in this room, I know this, wakes up every morning thinking about what they can do. And many people feel frustrated that they can't do more, they can't do enough. And then
we say, well, Deborah's doing it.
Well, I wake up every morning knowing that I have a full list of things to do, 24/6, and sadly on occasion, 24/7.
So I'm one of those people who was genuinely and maybe stupidly shocked by the outpouring, the explosion of anti-Semitism, pick your word. And it wasn't just the occurrence, it was the relish. It was a certain kind of glee, particularly on social media. And I'm wondering if you think I'm being oversensitive, or you've noticed a certain kind of new or at least unleashed zeal.
Many people in this room know, and certainly you know, Abby, that I've always been one of those who say, don't cry the sky is falling. We can't be Chicken Little, because if we do that, when the sky does actually fall, people won't be listening. So I've always taken a reserved approach. When I see it, I'll fight it, as I did in court. Some of you may have been expecting Rachel Weisz. She couldn't make it, so she sent me. And I don't surprise easily. But I've been, maybe not surprised, but sobered. And you used exactly the word I've used before, the glee with which people torn down pictures of hostages. We just heard some about the hostages, painfully so. The glee to which they stood in front of Hunter College a few days ago chanting, Jews decide, do you support genocide? And they didn't even say Israelis, they didn't say Zionists, they said Jews. I mean, the glee with which a Hamas terrorist called his mother and said, I just killed 10 Yahudim. Maybe from him, that wasn't surprising, but the glee that we've seen, and I've seen it in Germany, in Italy, in the United Kingdom, in France, since October 7th, it is quite shocking.
You're an expert in Holocaust denialism. We're seeing October 7th denialism, particularly about the gender-based violence. Can you just address?
Yeah. Holocaust denial took a good 2 decades to gain any traction. October 7th denialism took 2 days, something like that, if not less than that. And it is quite shocking, but they share something in common. You deny inconvenient history. You deny inconvenient facts. If I want to paint the Nazis as just have involved in a war but not having done anything too terrible, I can explain away lots of things, but I can't explain away a genocide, so you deny the genocide. If I'm, in Rwanda, there are people who want to say that it was just a civil war and it wasn't a genocide of the Tutsis. You explain it away. So too here, if I want to paint Hamas terrorists as freedom fighters, as liberators, I've got to explain away all this, and that's what we're seeing.
Can you address just the UN sort of recognition now that actually something?
Well, I'm very grateful, and it's a strange word to use that they've come around to recognizing it. But as I'm sure many of you know, 2 or 3 days ago, UN Women just released a report. You can download it, and it's quite strong about what happened. That it took them so long, that there was such silence before that was very disturbing, to be mild about it. It's wrong in the face of any kind of terror act to be silent. But for feminist groups, for human rights groups, to be silent or say we need evidence. What happened to Believe the Women from Me Too, et cetera, is more than wrong. It's hypocritical and it's anti-Semitic. And Ambassador Michelle Taylor, our ambassador at the Human Rights Council in Geneva, and I had an article in The Guardian. And I was asked, in fact, by some people at other newspapers local here, why we did it in The Guardian, decrying this, saying, when Boko Haram kidnapped the women, nobody said, show us the evidence. When the Yazidi women were horrifically treated, people spoke out. When Iranian women who took off their head, had the gall to take off their headscarves, we spoke out. Nobody asked, where's the evidence? Show me the evidence. And the only difference we could find was these were perceived to be Jews. They weren't all Jews. There were Bedouins, there were Druze, there were foreign visitors who'd come to the rave or were working there, but they were perceived to be Jews, and it's all right to do this.
Can I just ask you, Deborah, just personally, I'm curious. I mean, these are your friends and collaborators on all of these issues over so many years. Did you feel personally
No,
kind of
because over the past decade, I've seen the slow shift, so I wasn't surprised. But I have many friends, acquaintances, as do you, who have worked closely on these issues, and they haven't done it strategically. They haven't said, we'll support your efforts, so when we are in trouble, you'll support. They did it because they believed in it. Many of them believed that their tradition, their Jewish tradition, tzedek, tzedek, tirdof, justice, justice shall you pursue. The Torah thought it was so important to pursue justice. It didn't say it once, it said it twice, justice, justice. They did it, and they fully expected when it happens to us, you'll be by our side. So there was a deep sense of betrayal, and for many, a sense that hypocrisy on the part of these groups.
You hear so many say that education is the antidote to this moment. Do you think that people hate less if they learn more?
The problems we've seen on leading campuses throughout the world. I just came back from the UK. I was in Germany right before then. I've been in Italy and in this country. Our leading educational institutions, many of them harbor strong strains of anti-Semitism. Education is important. I've dedicated my whole life to educating. So if I didn't think it was important, I wouldn't be doing this. Education is important, but it's not a magic bullet. It's not a silver bullet. You can be a PhD and an SOB at the same time, That's all they'll remember from this talk, You can quote it, it's all right. Look, the mobile killing units of the Nazis, the ones who did the Holocaust by bullets, who killed over 1 million Jews, there were 4 of the units. 3 of the heads of the units had PhDs. 1 had 2 PhDs and 1 was a minister. So it's not education, it's how you educate, it's morality, and it's people standing up and saying, that's wrong.
So many of us in this room have kids on campuses right now. I know you're asked this every day. At Central Synagogue last night when you spoke, actually my synagogue, you said too many universities haven't taken anti-Semitism seriously. So I guess I would like to ask you, we don't have a lot of time, but just concretely, what would it look like in your mind if they did?
When something happens, when, as in a big school on the West Coast, last week where a pro-Israel, the event had to be closed down because there was a threat to the Jewish students. The university issued a statement which didn't mention anti-Semitism and didn't mention Jews. This morning or last night, it issued a strongly worded statement condemning anti-Semitism and saying that it has no place on our campus. That statement should have been made 4 days ago. I'm happy to see it now because it's unequivocal, but it's got to be automatic.
We are often talking about anti-Semitism from the right and anti-Semitism from the left, and maybe that's oversimplistic, but I would love you to give us your diagnosis of that spectrum right now.
I think, first of all, I'm often asked in my hearings, in my Senate confirmation hearings, they said, what do you think, the worst or the left, the which is worse? And I said, I plan to be, and I have a wonderful team which has now been expanded quite in the face of the situation at the State Department. We are equal opportunity fighters of anti-Semitism. We don't care where it comes from, right, left, center, Christian, Muslim, atheist, Jew, we're going to fight it. But I think a better, more efficacious way of thinking about it is not as a spectrum, but as a horseshoe, where the 2 ends of the horseshoe meet and share views about the Jews. It's people who are willing to engage in authoritarian, believe in conspiracy theories, looking for someone else to blame. Simple solutions, blame the Jews.
You have been outspoken recently about reminding us to see anti-Semitism through a more global lens, and I would love you to tease that out a little bit.
What I think is for too long, and it's true, we saw anti-Semitism as a threat to Jews, to the welfare of Jews in the Jewish community. And were it that alone, I would say it's a valid thing for a government to fight. It's a valid thing for a government to put at the top of its agenda. A government's job is just like a parent, in loco parentis. The parent's job is to keep a kid safe. Now, how you define safe depends on your perspective. The job of a government is to keep its citizens safe, particularly its vulnerable citizens. Why do we have child welfare laws or work laws or special things for the elderly or the ill or watch? Because it's got to keep them safe. And so that alone would make anti-Semitism worth fighting or important for a government to fight, but it's more than that. Anti-Semitism is a threat to democracy. Anybody who has bought into the anti-Semitic myth that the Jews control, and you fill in the blank, media, elections, whatever, has given up on democracy. And more than just that. So that's like level 2, protection of Jews, threat to democracy. Level 3, which we're seeing even more, I saw it before, I was already writing about this before October 7th, but it's become more clear, is a threat to national security and national stability. Bad actors, or as in the American intelligence community, they've taught me to say malign influencers. Very fancy word, but I like it. It's got a lot of syllables, so it's a nice phrase. A malign influencers use anti-Semitism, here I'll use a Yiddish term, as a kochlöffel, as a cooking spoon, to stir up the pot. Whether they be other governments, whether they be NGOs, non-governmental organizations, whether they be individuals. If I can make your democracy feel like a failed democracy, if I can make you unsure that your government can protect you, if I can make you say, oh, you claim democracy is better, look, you have this terrible anti-Semitism, so they gin it up. Now, I'm not suggesting that they create it where it isn't there, but what I am saying is they find the weak spots. whether it's, whatever country it might be, and we've seen a lot of it coming from countries that never before showed any anti-Semitism. PRC, the People's Republic of China, they find the weak spot and they add fuel to the fire. So it is a threat also to national security and stability. So I've said to government leaders, and thankfully in our government I haven't had to make, you don't care about Jews? That's okay. You care about democracy, you care about national stability. Think of anti-Semitism as the camel's nose under the tent. You just see the nose, there's a lot of trouble behind it. Or as the flashing amber light before the light turns red. In fact, I was in conversation, I was invited to one of our leading, I can say at the CIA, to talk to them about anti-Semitism. And I said to them, if you're in a foreign country, which is where they do their work, and you see anti-Semitism, expect bad things to follow.
Mm. Do you use the Yiddish? The CIA?
Not with them, no, but I did tell them, I said, this is great. I said to them, I'm speaking to this room full of CIA people, I said, and if you don't know what you're seeing, you're not sure, call my office, call my team. We want to be assets to you. We want to be your assets. And the room got very quiet and I said, oh, not that kind of asset, So.
The U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. You've had a front row seat on what the government's doing, and sometimes it just sounds like some kind of fancy title for something. What is it that we should actually
look, we've had presidents for years from both sides of the aisle, all perspectives, who have condemned anti-Semitism, and God bless them for it. But this administration decided that condemnation wasn't enough, and they convened over 24 different agencies. There's going to be a panel on this morning with one of my colleagues, one of my teammates, and people from the White House as well. And what can you do? Look at your programs. Look at your programs. And not just the usual suspects, not Department of Justice, Education, FBI, counterterrorism, but agriculture was there. And the agriculture, you may hear from this because someone from agriculture I think is going to be here. They run 4-H clubs in places where there are no Jews. What can they do to educate? What can FEMA do if there's a tragedy? Sandy, for the New Yorkers, you'll remember this. It hits an Orthodox neighborhood, and you bring in truckloads of food. Make sure they're kosher food. So sometimes it's fighting anti-Semitism. Sometimes it's enabling Jewish life. But there are weekly meetings about this, and progress is being made. There are benchmarks we've put in our report, and it's very encouraging. The situation is terrible, but the response.
And not just to give a shout out to where we are, but how does the ADL partner with you or help you?
We use I'm testifying tomorrow before Congress on anti-Semitism in the Western Hemisphere, particularly Latin America, South America, and ADL statistics are exceptionally important, the granular work that the ADL does. This is a fight. This can't just be a government fight. This has to be a whole of society fight. This has to be each of you calling out. If you hear someone saying something anti-Semitic, call it out, challenge it. But you've got to educate yourself. You can't just say, that's bad. You got to know what you're doing, how you're doing. And if it's a friend, I've had students say this to me. My dorm mate, my suite mate, made some sort of comment. I didn't want to say anything because I might lose them as a friend. And sometimes, I don't always say it, but I often think maybe you should find yourself other friends.
This idea that, as chilling as it is, that it's 1938 all over again, that there is that kind of historic parallel, since you're a historian?
I just had this conversation last night with some of the foreign visitors and delegates to this gathering, and I had it last week in London as well. I don't think the parallel is there. 1938, so when I say it's not 1938, people say 1933, and of course they're referring to Germany, to Italy. What we saw in Europe at that time was government-sponsored anti-Semitism. What we're seeing certainly in this country is a government that has put itself wholeheartedly into the fight against anti-Semitism. We see that. We have special envoys on anti-Semitism in numerous countries. Governments are fighting it. Now, not all governments, but in the vast majority, certainly amongst democracies, governments recognize this is wrong and must be fought. And that's a big difference.
So finally, Ambassador, you wrote a beautiful, powerful op-ed in the New York Times, ironically 1 month before October 7th, and I just want to quote from it briefly. You said basically that the most powerful way to combat anti-Semitism is to double down on our Jewish traditions. Quote, combating anti-Semitism requires a shift in perspective. It must sprout from a positive place. We must know that what we are protecting from assault. We must be motivated far more by our love for the insights, wisdom, and joy embedded in Jewish culture than by the fight against those who harbor an insane hatred of it.
I really believe that, and I say that as someone who has spent her academic career, her professional career, teaching about what is done to Jews. We also have to know what Jews do. We just can't be motivated by protecting ourselves from the enemies from without. We have to celebrate from what's within. That calls for learning, it calls for study, it calls for familiarizing yourself, but don't let the oppressors control how you identify. You know, maybe just in closing, I was at a major book festival, Hay on Wye on Hay in Wales. You know, it's one of the biggest little town becomes, you know, a book festival for a week. It's amazing. But I was being interviewed by the former editor of a major British daily, and she said to me, how do you do this day after day? And this was before I became an ambassador, when I was just writing about it. And I said, you know, we've been around for a very long time. And as a historian, I can say there's no logical reason why Jews should exist. Whether you look at the first century, the rise of Christianity in Jerusalem and Judea, Samaria, or you look at Rome and Christianity, or you look at the rise of Islam or Protestant, Martin Luther, or you go into later years, you go into socialism, communism, the Holocaust. It's not logical that we should be here. But Mir Zayin and Da, we're here. We survive, we thrive, and it's not because of the anti-Semites, it's despite the anti-Semites, because we're sure of who we are and what we are.
As we will be hearing today, the Abraham Accords are such an important development for the Middle East and for efforts to normalize ties between Israel and neighboring Arab and Muslim countries. I know firsthand how transformative it has been. I come to ADL as a former Israeli diplomat who served twice at the Israel missions in the Gulf, years before the Abraham Accords were signed. At that time, this cooperation was secret, under the surface. With the 2020 agreement, this collaboration based on shared values and strategic priorities went public, enabling the flowering of not just official bilateral engagement, but more significantly, of people-to-people relationships. At the most basic level, the Abraham Accords change our understanding of what is possible between Arabs and Israelis, Muslims and Jews. As some of you may know, my son, who is now 10 years old, was born in the UAE and is believed to be the first Israeli citizen to be born in the Gulf region. He can hear you now, so you can be louder, it's okay. At the time, this was seen as an anomaly, as Israelis were largely prevented from living in the region. But today, after the Accords, we have seen tens of thousands of Israelis welcomed as visitors and residents in the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and other countries. A truly historic and indeed a world-altering development. And one more international note. Earlier this week, ADL rolled out the ADL Global Atlas, an important new resource that, thanks to ADL international alliances, serves as a one-stop shop for anti-Semitism-related information. The map that you see here provides quick and direct access to data points that provide comprehensive overview of the state of anti-Semitism in specific countries, regions, and continents. So be sure to go to adl.org to check that out. And now, I'm pleased to welcome back to the stage ADL CEO and National Director, Jonathan Greenblatt.
Our next speaker is someone who I have disagreed with strenuously. He worked for a White House that I consistently, and we at ADL, publicly criticized in the strongest terms. And we've had more than a few tough phone calls. But I invited him to speak here today. And over the past few days, more than a few of you have asked me why. Well, I hear you. And I've heard my supporters, I've heard board members who've asked me that with a sense of exasperation and often with emotion. So let me answer the question, and I'll do it right here and now. Part of the answer is the simple fact that ADL is not a partisan organization. We are not solely from one part of our community. Some of you sitting here today, some of you watching on the live stream, some of you are Republicans, some of you are Democrats, and some of you can't stand either party. Right? Some of you never miss a Shabbat morning at Shul, and some of us think Saturday mornings are for golf or tennis. Some of you watch Fox, some of you watch MSNBC. And our lineup of speakers this year, as we've done in previous years, reflects that ideological diversity. It's not an accident. It is our intention. But there's something else. Because another part of the answer is that we are living in an October 8th world. And I firmly believe that we, as a Jewish community, cannot afford to be divided. We do not have to agree on everything, but we cannot allow the partisanship and the polarization that has poisoned so much of our society. We can't allow it to do the same to us. Because like it or not, we are in this together. When they came to Kfar Aza, they didn't say, "What do you think of Bibi Netanyahu?" When they came to Tree of Life Synagogue, they didn't say, "What's your opinion on immigration?" And when they harass our children on college campuses, they don't ask, "What's your view on a two-state solution?" In all these places, we are attacked because we are Jews. And we need to recognize that if we believe in Am Yisrael, if we hold that value dear, we've got to be true to it. And it is indisputable that our next speaker and honoree is someone who, in his public service, singularly helped to further the cause of peace in the Middle East, something that has had an immeasurable impact on the Jewish community in Israel and around the world. I really don't care how you vote, but the Abraham Accords are a groundbreaking achievement. They brought normalization for the Jewish state with a number of countries around the Arab world at a scale that was once unimaginable. Not only are there now government-to-government relationships between countries like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, Israel and the Sudan, but there are emerging, real people-to-people connections as well. The Abraham Accord set a precedent that, according to reports, had countries like Indonesia and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia ready to join before 10/7. And again, according to reports, normalization is still on the table. The Abraham Accords laid out a multilateral framework for regional peace that stands out as equally important as the 1978 Camp David Accords. Since 10/7, the Accords' importance has loomed even larger. It has helped to maintain channels of dialogue between the Jewish state and an important contingent of the Arab world, despite pushback across the Middle East and even from some here at home. I believe the Abraham Accords is one of the most consequential foreign policy accomplishments of the U.S. government over the last 50 years. That's why I'm happy to welcome to the stage an individual who, by all accounts, was the driving force inside the government to make this groundbreaking diplomatic initiative happen. And so the recipient of our inaugural Abraham Accords Champions Award, ladies and gentlemen, Jared Kushner.
Thank you, Jonathan, for your kind words and for the opportunity to be here today to make this speech. The contents of this speech is something that I've been writing in my head since October 7th without knowing if or when I would share it publicly. I'm probably more surprised than all of you that it's happening here at the ADL. So, anti-Semitism is wrong, unfounded, and dangerous. Sadly, it is more alive today than many of us wanted to believe. October 7 shocked the world, but has also brought an awakening to the Jewish people. A new approach is needed. The first step in solving a hard problem is always to define what success looks like. It doesn't mean that's where you'll end up, but having a stated goal is critical. One of my favorite quotes is from the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland, who says to Alice, "If you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter which path you take." Our goal must be to identify, address, and fully eradicate anti-Semitism once and for all. Over the past thousands of years, we have experienced a regrettable through line. From slavery in Egypt, to expulsion from Spain, to the 17th century Cossacks who massacred 100,000 Jews in Ukraine, to the 1905 publication of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion in St. Petersburg, to the 6 million Jews who were exterminated during the Holocaust, to October 7th. This cycle is the world's shame. History has shown that eradicating anti-Semitism is a hard goal to achieve, but with focus and with unity, it is possible. The Jewish people are the most successful minority in the history of the world. Today, we are as strong as we have ever been. We can no longer afford to ignore this problem. It must be addressed head-on and in new ways. Social media posts are nice, but little truly changes from complaining. This is a great example. Where many see hopeless, unsolvable challenges, my experiences make me believe that real progress can be made. This is what I felt when we pursued peace deals in the Middle East, where no one had succeeded for 30 years before, the largest trade deals in the history of the world with Mexico and Canada, which everyone doubted we could make, a bipartisan prison and criminal justice reform when everyone said the country was too divided, and the development, manufacturing, and distribution of a vaccine in under a year to help stop a global pandemic when all the experts said it couldn't be done. When a goal is important, it must be pursued with vigor. I am not scared by these aggressive marches or the vile spread of anti-Semitism on college campuses and in far too many organizations. I believe that a small fraction of this comes from evil intent, a larger fraction from opportunists, and the largest fraction by far comes from ignorance. To make progress, we must engage to eliminate the evil, outmaneuver the opportunists, and educate the ignorant. To start, the Jewish people must be properly understood, not just by others, but also by ourselves. Like most religious groups, we are multicultural, multi-partisan, multi-ethnic, and multiracial. There are as many ways to be a Jew as there are Jews on earth. We all know the old joke about having 10 Jews in a room and 11 opinions. I often remind my children that when Rabbi Hillel was challenged to explain the entire Torah while standing on one foot, he replied, "Do unto others as you want others to do to you." That is the entire Torah. The rest is just commentary. Every one of us has a role to play. The Jewish record of achievement can be matched against any people who ever walked the earth. Jews make up just 0.2% of the global population, yet have won 22% of the Nobel Prizes ever awarded. From Einstein to Elie Wiesel, who survived the concentration camps to chant Eicha at a synagogue on Fifth Avenue near my own family, from Philip Roth to Bob Dylan to Leonard Cohen to Sandy Koufax to the founders of Dell Computers, Starbucks, Facebook, and Google, the world is better off because of the contributions of Jews. We have some of the best comedians, Jerry Seinfeld, Jackie Mason, Sacha Baron Cohen. We're less accomplished in basketball, but we do have Amari Stoudemire. The countless millions whose lives have been saved or improved by the polio vaccine, including Palestinians and Muslims, have Jonas Salk to thank. This is not a malicious cabal, as some ignorant conspiracy theorists have alleged. This is a noble, honorable, and admirable history. Even Drake had a bar mitzvah. Jews should do more to study their history from a young age and never stop. It is a history of struggle and ingenuity. To survive and overcome so many improbable circumstances is truly remarkable. My being here today is a miracle based on my grandparents surviving the Nazis who tried to kill them. I have always been proud to be a Jew. When I started my diplomacy in the Middle East, it was not lost on me that I was a Jewish American working with Muslim leaders to make breakthroughs that many members of both of our religions thought were impossible. The approach I took was different than from those before me. As we spent 3 years discussing these ideas and developing trusting friendships, what we had in common overwhelmed our differences. Instead of dwelling on the disagreements of the past, we focused on the benefits their countries would reap in the future from being together. When I met MBZ, the leader of UAE, in 2017, after 2 hours of conversation, he said to me, "Jared, I believe you're going to make peace here in the Middle East." I was surprised. I said to him, "Why are you saying that?" It was just a couple months into my effort. And he said, "Usually America sends here one of 3 different types of people. The first are those who come and they fall asleep in our meetings. Those aren't going to get anywhere. The second are those who come and they read messages and transmit with no opportunity to have a real feedback and dialogue." He said, "The third type they send are those who come and try to convince me to do things that are not in my country's interests." He said, "You're the first person to come and really try to listen and understand our perspective. And so I believe things will be possible with you." The Abraham Accords was the result of dialogue, understanding, and trust. Another line of effort we must pursue is to illuminate to others that when you work with the Jews, you can be better off. Following the breakthroughs of the Abraham Accords, the economic and social benefits were far greater than we had imagined. In August 2020, I took the first ever commercial flight from Tel Aviv to Abu Dhabi, where we were given permission to fly over Saudi Arabia for the first time. Today, there are religious, cultural, and scientific collaborations, as well as billions of dollars of business being done between these two capitals. Even with the current war, 2023 trade between Israel and the Gulf countries will exceed 2022. I was touched this past week when I was in Abu Dhabi, where I met with some of the rabbis and leaders of the Jewish community. We discussed how special they felt to be in this frontier community, and we discussed some of the restrictions that were being placed on community gatherings and how they were being done for their protection and safety. What had occurred so quickly as a coming together between Jews and Muslims in this place, we realized we had been taking for granted how unique it was and how young this new relationship is. We all committed to go back to our communities to work harder between each other and to continue to build this strength so that it will never be disrupted again. Speaking with both Jews and Muslims who are navigating the dynamics caused by the current conflict left me more positive than ever that the Abraham Accords have the foundation to prosper and expand across additional nations, including Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Indonesia, and many, many more to come. Another important line of effort we must pursue is to strengthen and celebrate the many mutually beneficial relationships with groups from other backgrounds, with the Muslim community, with the Black community, with the Asian community, who have a lot of respect for the Jewish people, and very importantly, with the Christian community. I was very disturbed recently when I saw a Pew poll that showed that evangelical perception of Jews was a plus 40, and Jewish perception of evangelicals was a negative 40. I had never met an evangelical living in New Jersey and New York until I went on the 2016 campaign, and I can assure you they were much different than what I imagined. When you have a people that likes you so much, we should be making more effort to get to know them, to get to understand them, and to build those relationships further. We can all do better by keeping an open mind, an open door, and an open heart. One of the beautiful effects of post-October 7th has been seeing the members of the Citizens Israel Army of Israel, who were on opposing political sides only weeks earlier, work trustingly together in tanks and in brigades to protect their families and their homeland. It should not take an existential threat to help us realize the appropriate weighting of political differences. Focusing on better understanding and mutually beneficial relationships is critical. The ADL has done this well over the years. They fought on the front lines of civil rights and other important battles, and Jonathan is to be commended for demanding that those groups stand up for us now in our hour of need. The primary battlefield where the most intense anti-Semitism festers is in the opposition to the existence of the State of Israel. Israel's a vibrant democracy in the Middle East, a military superpower, an economic and technological force, and one of the most forward-leaning environmental stewards on earth. Israel's the only country that has more trees today than it had 50 years ago. In Israel, you can practice whatever religion you want and live whatever lifestyle you choose. Shouldn't progressive social advocates be celebrating this? When women were brutally raped on October 7th, most liberal women's groups in America stayed silent. Organizations that fight for LGBT rights condemned a country that allows freedom and marched for a terrorist organization that punishes gay people with death. Where were these voices of protest when Syria killed 500,000 of their citizens? Or just weeks ago, when Pakistani authorities displaced 375,000 Afghan refugees? The condemnations you're hearing on college campuses is not about Palestinians. It is about Jews. The United Nations has unfortunately become the grand cathedral of anti-Semitism. The advocates in the complex across town espouse their virtues and explain how they are sophisticated, compassionate people doing important work to make the world a better place. But numbers don't lie. There are 193 member states, and only one of them is a Jewish state. The United Nations officially condemned Israel 14 times in 2023, while the entire rest of the world combined earned only 7 rebukes. Sophisticated countries like France and Sweden supported the 14 resolutions adopted against Israel during last year's General Assembly session. But these beacons of fair play failed to introduce a single UNGA resolution against Russia, Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, Sudan, Iran, Yemen, or 170 other countries. I can go on and on. It's been this way since the birth of the Jewish state. Since the creation of the UN Human Rights Council in 2006, there have been nearly as many resolutions condemning Israel as for the entire rest of the world combined. The 45 resolutions against Israel made up almost half of all the country-specific resolutions passed in the UNHRC. This morning, as I was preparing this, I went on Perplexity, and I saw that since 1948, there's been 226 UN security resolutions concerning Israel. North Korea, there's been 21. Iran, the #1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world, 7. Something doesn't make any sense here. UNRWA, the organization that has received over $6 billion in funding from America alone, has now been proved to have terrorists on its payroll and militant installations integrated into and protected by its facilities. Its existence has perpetuated this problem, and it must be eliminated for progress to be made. This is a double standard. Those yelling the loudest for aggrieved minorities and for equality have been at best silent on this double standard, and at worst leading the charge in its opposition. I challenge the United Nations to take a single year off from focusing on the sole Jewish member state and instead work on some of the other vexing problems we have in the world. As Jews, another effort we must make is to focus our considerable resources and our enduring strength on our real friends and identify our real enemies. Let's work to make our voices heard at these institutions. If we believe their missions before October 7th were good, let's engage and work with them to reform on the issue of anti-Semitism. Let's be clear about our expectations and help them correct course. This is a very, very important point to me. Sometimes condemnation is needed, but in most cases, constructive engagement will create better outcomes, a clearer mutual understanding, and more importantly, our goal, the elimination of anti-Semitic thoughts, sentiments, and statements. Success, as I define it, is not to fight. Success is having nothing to fight about. Harvard, University of Pennsylvania, Columbia, and other leading universities do not have to be our enemies. They have clearly gone astray, but we should engage to help them find their way back to the right course. The tough conversations that are being had today are long overdue. Jonathan, thank you for having me here today and for recognizing the success of the Abraham Accords, the first peace agreement between Israel and Muslim countries in over 30 years, which occurred under the Trump administration. When you called me a few weeks ago asking me to accept an award and address your convention, I expressed my reluctance. I conveyed my honest feedback that I had grown skeptical of the ADL, seeing it more as a political organization whose condemnations have alienated and then hardened in their resentment many potential allies. However, I believe your genuine expressed desire for a partnership to fight anti-Semitism that transcends political ideology is badly needed at this time. After all, how can we ask others to stand with the Jewish people if we cannot stand with each other? We cannot let this be about politics. This is about the Jews. If Jews cannot look past their partisan beliefs to acknowledge positive efforts on behalf of the Jewish people, then we will be doomed to history repeating itself as it has time and time again. On October 7th, Hamas didn't care if the Jews they were torturing, raping, and killing were liberal or conservative. They killed them simply because they were Jews. Let's not waste our energy in the wrong places. The people who have supported, defended, and uplifted the Jews are not our enemies because of a careless tweet or a silly meme. We should be welcoming the allyship of those who wish to stand with us, regardless of their politics. You can think whatever you like. Thank you. You can think whatever you like about Donald Trump, but he's not an anti-Semite. For me, thank you. For me, the condemnations by some Jewish groups of a man I know and love, who blessed my wife converting to Judaism, wore a yarmulke when he walked down the aisle at our wedding, proudly attended the Brit Milah of his grandson, of his Jewish grandson, and who has always been a strong and vocal supporter for the Jewish people in the state of Israel, was confusing. The results of his presidency speak loudly. When Donald Trump was president, Israel signed 5 peace deals with its neighbors. Iran and its proxies were suffocating under punishing sanctions. The Golan Heights was returned to Israel, and he did what previous presidents had promised but failed to do, which is he moved the American embassy to Jerusalem and finally recognized it as the capital of the Jewish state of Israel. He also did something which was not as recognized at the time, but is getting a lot more appreciation paid to it now, which is he foresaw the brewing anti-Semitism on college campuses and signed an essential executive order on combating anti-Semitism that was supported by the ADL to force universities to provide equal protection to Jewish students who were being discriminated against. There are now several actions being taken thanks to the rules that were put in place under that executive order. These efforts should be recognized by all Jews and built upon. I'm personally grateful to the many non-Jews who have stood up and publicly been counted as allies to the Jewish people. My heart goes out to the Palestinian people. They could use better friends as well. Supporters who wish to see them thrive are wasting their efforts by scapegoating Israel. They must demand accountability from Palestinian leaders and expect civil behavior from their citizenry. Let me close by saying that the Jewish people have more power today to bring change than most of us appreciate. Only by learning from the past and working together, the goal to identify, address, and eradicate anti-Semitism can be achieved. We have proven through the Abraham Accords that have held firm during the months of this bloody war in the region and through centuries of mostly peaceful coexistence through the broader Middle East that Jews and Muslims have a desire to return to the pre-World War II days of living side by side as brothers. After all, most human beings desire peace and harmony. Let us honor the legacy of the 1,200 Jews who died on October 7th by using this tragedy to activate Jews from around the world to address the dangers that we have sadly ignored. By shifting course, future tragedies can be avoided, and their lives and the lives of the non-Jews who have died in this conflict will not have been lost in vain. Thank you.